Water and the Overdiepse polder have a long history together. It may be hard to imagine, but 750 years ago, the area around the Overdiepse polder in Waspik, North Brabant, was a large swamp and peat bog. The first settlements were established in the 12th century on the banks of the then Roman Maas. Since then, the appearance of the polder has undergone many changes, and it has fulfilled various functions.
En de zee die greep zijn kans.
And on the 21st of November 1421, the sea took its opportunity on the feast of St. Elizabeth, hence the St. Elizabeth's flood, and the whole polder actually filled up like a bathtub.
Eigenlijk vol als een badkuip.
Slowly the land emerged, and the polder as we now know it came into existence. Due to persistent flooding in the Den Bosch region, in 1883 it was decided to dig the Bergse Maas.
Het graven van die Bergse Maas was een enorm.
Digging the Bergse Maas was a huge task. It was done with spade and wheelbarrow by a whole army of workers from the Rotterdam area. Every day, digging into the heavy river clay.
Graven in die zware rivierklei.
Digging was done by hand until a mechanized digger, an excavator, could take over. With the completion of the Bergse Maas in 1904, the current contours of the Overdiepse polder emerged. These contours are defined by, in the north, the Bergse Maas, in the south, Oude Maasje, in the west, the Punt, and in the east, the Winterdijk with its floodplains. During the battles of the Second World War, just like every winter in those days, the polder flooded. From October 1944 until the liberation, fierce fighting took place here. This memorial commemorates the many victims of the struggle for Kapelse Veer, a short but intense period of which remains are still being found. In 1946, a start was made on the first agricultural land redistribution, for which the plans date to before the Second World War. The main objective was to improve the structure of the polder. For example, 4 paved roads were constructed running from north to south, and the polder was divided into 14 large sectors. As a result, the typical appearance of the Slagenland disappeared. In 1953, the polder flooded again, this time caused by the natural disaster that resulted in the infamous flood disaster. That event triggered the implementation of the Delta Plan in Zeeland, which still receives considerable international attention. In 1970, the second land redistribution process took place. The sluice in the Oude Maasje turned the polder into dry land. Even before the polder was completely water-free, construction of 17 farms began. This was in 1974. For the first time since the creation of the polder, farming families lived there.
This
is also the Overdiepse polder, before anyone lived there. Those horses were transported by ferry. That's me. In those days, I had to work every now and then. With the construction of the Abraham Camp Bridge in 1978, the polder was finally opened up. The official opening of the bridge was celebrated at the Bink family farm. It happened on our farm, because we lived closest to the bridge, so all those people walked from the bridge to our farm. We welcomed them, and there were some speeches and so on. It was just a casual get-together. The advent of the bridge meant the end of the Han-Rekkers ferry, locally known as Hanover. The saying Hanover came about because you always yelled over. My father was called Han, so they yelled Han, hence Hanover. The ferry arrived here and the farming equipment was unloaded. In the summer, hay was ferried, grain was transferred, and potatoes were dug up. In 1973, when the farmers came, it became very clear more was going to be transported by truck. And so the decision was taken to replace the ferry. And because he'd already worked with boats, my father started the marina. Living and working in the polder changed dramatically after the construction of the bridge. And a few decades later, when the Mounds Plan will be completed, this might be a much more fundamental change for the Overdiepse polder. The Mounds Plan was triggered by the floods of 1993 and 1995. After these national disasters, it was apparent that more room for the rivers was needed. Right from the start, the polder was considered as a possible location for water storage, a measure that contributes to dry feet for 4 million people in the river area. In 2010, under the leadership of the Brabant Delta Water Board, the realization of the Mounds Plan was officially launched, a plan that was drawn up in close cooperation with the residents. Already, several farmers work and live on their new farms on the Mounds. Some other farmers packed up their business and started a new life at a different location. Years later, when the plan became more serious, we thought, we're leaving. We've lived here for 26 years, and even though you've made it your future, your children were born here, and you would prefer not to leave. You face choices. You have to decide. You have to move forward. And sometimes you think, oh no, can I do all this? But the boat leaves, chugs ahead, and somehow a solution is found. It's also been a challenge. There are now several farming families living on the Mounds while the realization of the polder goes on.
Well,
as you can see in the background, we're still working, even though part of the work is stopped due to the winter. But we're on track. Most of the farms have been removed. Some of the residents have already moved on to their new mounds. New housing for livestock and residents is also being established on other mounds. According to plan, we're going to be finished with the work well before November 2015. And then as far as we're concerned, the floods can happen again. We're ready for the water. The polder has a long and rich history. And in light of that history, the implementation of the Mounds Plan really only covers a short period, but a period which, until its completion in 2015, has literally moved mountains. At the beginning of 2013, 5 new farms have been completed.
It
was a polder when it was flooded by the St. Elizabeth's flood. The land recovered, and then around 1900 we dug the Bergse Maas through it. And later in 1970, the first farmers arrived. And now it can flood again, once every 25 years. And the farmer ploughed on. Hundreds of years later, this old saying still applies to the Overdiepse polder, which will be ready for a long and fertile future and will remain a valuable area for housing, agriculture, livestock, and recreation. And once, in an estimated 25 years, room for the river.